You're sitting there right now with something they'll never understand. Something they couldn't buy, couldn't steal, couldn't manipulate out of you. You've got the cheat codes. Not to their game, no. To a game you built from scratch while they were busy thinking they had you figured out. See, they made a critical error, a fatal miscalculation. They thought teaching you pain was breaking you. They thought every manipulation was weakening you. They thought every betrayal was pushing you further into confusion. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, is that every single move they made on you was a free lesson. You were taking notes, not on paper, not consciously, but somewhere deep in that brilliant mind of yours, you were cataloging everything. Every lie had a structure. Every manipulation had a pattern. Every fake smile had a tell. And you absorbed it all like a sponge, soaking up secrets they didn't even know they were spilling. They thought they were the teachers. They thought they were the masters. They walked around with that arrogance, that confidence that comes from years of getting away with their tactics. They'd done this before. They'd broken people before. They'd won before. But they'd never played against you before. Let me tell you what happened. While they were celebrating their little victories, while they were patting themselves on the back for making you doubt yourself, while they were congratulating each other on keeping you small, you were in the lab. You were in the shadows. You were reverse engineering every single thing they ever did to you. That guilt trip they used in 2019, you dissected it. You understood exactly which words were chosen to trigger your empathy. You mapped the tone shifts. You recognized the strategic pauses. You learned it so well you could write a manual on it. That silent treatment they weaponized. You studied it. You understood the psychology behind it. You recognized it wasn't about teaching you a lesson. It was about creating desperation. It was about making you chase. And once you understood the mechanics, the spell broke forever. That gaslighting? Oh, that beautiful twisted gaslighting where they made you question your own memory, your own perception, your own sanity. You decoded it. You learned how they'd shift narratives, how they'd deny things you both knew happened, how they'd make you feel crazy for remembering the truth. And something clicked. Something permanent. You didn't just survive their game. You mastered it. You learned every rule, every strategy, every dirty trick in their playbook. You could run their plays better than they could at this point. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where you did something they never expected. You didn't use their game against them. That would have been too predictable. That would have kept you in their arena, playing by rules they invented. And you're smarter than that. You're more creative than that. You're more dangerous than that. You invented something entirely new. You took everything you learned, and you built a different system altogether. A game with rules they've never seen. A game where their usual tactics don't work. A game where manipulation bounces off you like rain off glass. A game where guilt trips fall flat. A game where silent treatment just gives you peace. A game where gaslighting sounds like comedy because you're so anchored in your truth that their lies are entertainment. You created a reality they can't navigate. And that's what's destroying them right now. That's what's keeping them up at night. They keep trying their old moves and nothing lands. They keep pushing the buttons that used to work and nothing happens. They keep running the same plays that broke you before, and you just look at them with those eyes, those calm, knowing eyes that say, I wrote the manual on what you're attempting right now. They're confused. Deeply, existentially confused, because the person standing in front of them doesn't match any model they have. The reactions they're getting don't fit any pattern they recognize. You're speaking a language they didn't know existed. You're operating on a frequency they can't tune into. You're playing a game they weren't invited to and don't have the equipment to join. Do you understand how terrifying that is for people who built their entire identity on controlling others? Do you comprehend what it does to a manipulator when their manipulation doesn't work? It breaks something inside them, something fundamental. Because manipulation isn't just a tactic for these people. It's their whole operating system. It's how they navigate existence. It's the only way they know how to get what they want. And when someone becomes immune, when someone transcends the entire framework, they don't just lose a target. They lose their sense of power. They lose their confidence. They lose the very foundation of who they believe themselves to be. And you did that. You did that just by evolving beyond their reach. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening in their heads right now. They're replaying old conversations, trying to figure out where you learned to respond like that. They're analyzing your new body language, trying to understand why you don't flinch anymore. They're running scenarios, trying to find a crack, an entry point, some way back into your psychology. And they're coming up empty. Every single time. Because you're not playing defense anymore. You're not reacting anymore. You're not operating within any framework they understand anymore. You built your own universe with physics they can't comprehend. And they're trying to use Earth logic in a dimension that doesn't recognize it. You want to know the funniest part? They still think they can figure you out. They still believe if they just study you long enough, watch you closely enough, analyze you deeply enough, they'll crack the code. They'll find the new weakness. They'll discover the updated playbook. But they won't. Because your game isn't about hiding weaknesses. It isn't about building better walls. It isn't about becoming a more sophisticated version of the same model. Your game is about authenticity. Your game is about truth. Your game is about operating from a place they don't have access to because they've never done the inner work required to reach it. They can't learn your game. Because it requires becoming a different kind of person. It requires honesty. They're incapable of. It requires self-reflection. They're terrified of. It requires accountability they'll never accept. Your game has prerequisites they'll never meet. And that's not strategy on your part. That's just the natural consequence of who you've become. See, when you stopped playing their game, something else happened. Something they didn't anticipate. You started attracting different people. People who speak your new language. People who operate on your new frequency. People who recognize the game you've invented because they've invented similar ones themselves. Your tribe changed. The relationships you're building now are nothing like the ones they trapped you in before. These new connections don't require manipulation because they're based on mutual respect. They don't require games because they're built on honesty. They don't require performance because authenticity is the currency. And they watch this from a distance. They see you thriving with people they can't infiltrate. They see you laughing with souls they can't manipulate. They see you building a life in a world they can't enter. And something inside them breaks a little more each day. Because it's not just that they lost you. It's that they lost access to the entire reality you've created. They're locked out permanently. They don't have the key because the key is transformation, and they chose to stay the same. You evolved. They didn't. You grew. They stagnated. You built something new. They're still running the same tired programs. Here's what they'll never admit to themselves. They need you more than you ever needed them. They needed your reactions to feel powerful. They needed your pain to feel alive. They needed your confusion to feel smart. They needed your dependence to feel important. But you don't need anything from them anymore. And that shift in power dynamics is so complete, so total, so irreversible that they don't even know how to process it. They wake up thinking about you, they go to sleep wondering about you, they obsess over what went wrong, what changed, how the person they had under control slipped away and became something unrecognizable. Meanwhile, you barely think about them at all. That's the real victory, not revenge, not proving them wrong, not making them suffer. The real victory is indifference. The real victory is having such a full life, such a complete existence, such a rich inner world that they become irrelevant. Background noise, old news. You didn't beat them at their game. You made their game obsolete. You didn't win the war. You left the battlefield entirely and built a civilization somewhere they can't reach. And the most beautiful part? You did it without announcing it. You did it without explaining it. You did it without giving them the satisfaction of knowing exactly how you escaped their maze. They just woke up one day and you were different. You were unreachable. You were free. They keep trying to pull you back. Have you noticed that? They keep creating situations designed to trigger old patterns. They keep testing to see if the old you still exists somewhere they can reach. They send messages designed to provoke. They create drama designed to involve. They manufacture crises designed to need your help. But you see it all now. But you see the mechanics. You see the strategy. You see the desperation behind every attempt. And instead of reacting, instead of engaging, instead of falling back into old patterns, you just observe. You watch them flail. You witness them exhaust themselves. You let them crash against walls you built without lifting a finger. Your non-reaction isn't passive. It's the most powerful move on the board, because it forces them to face something they've been avoiding their entire lives. The emptiness of their tactics when they don't work. The meaninglessness of their games when no one plays. The hollow reality of who they are when they can't define themselves by controlling someone else. You're not teaching them a lesson. You're just existing. And your existence alone is the lesson they can't handle. Now, let me tell you about the game you invented. Let me describe the rules of the reality you've built. Rule 1. Truth is the only currency. In your world, manipulation isn't just ineffective, it's expensive. Every lie costs trust. Every game costs connection. Every performance costs authenticity. The economy of your reality runs on honesty, and anyone trying to spend counterfeit currency gets rejected immediately. Rule 2. Boundaries aren't negotiable. In your world, no doesn't require explanation. Limits don't need justification. Your space is sovereign territory that others can visit but never own. Anyone who tries to argue with your boundaries reveals themselves as unsafe and gets removed from the board entirely. Rule 3. Peace is the priority. In your world, winning arguments isn't valuable. Being right isn't worth fighting for. Drama isn't engaging. The highest score goes to whoever maintains their inner calm regardless of external chaos. And you've mastered that game. You've become untouchable, not through armor, but through centeredness. Rule 4. Growth is mandatory. In your world, staying the same is falling behind. Learning is breathing. Evolution is survival. Anyone who refuses to grow, who clings to old patterns, who resists transformation, they naturally fall out of your reality. Not through rejection, but through incompatibility. They just can't keep up with where you're going. Rule 5. Energy is everything. In your world, what you give attention to grows. What you ignore withers. And you've become so intentional about where you direct your focus that toxic people simply starve in your presence. You're not fighting them. You're not confronting them. You're just not feeding them. And they can't survive without your energy. These rules seem simple. They seem basic. They seem like things anyone could implement. But they can't. Because these rules require something most people don't have. Self-awareness, emotional regulation, genuine security. These rules only work when you've done the deep work, when you've faced your shadows, when you've healed the wounds that made you vulnerable to manipulation in the first place. The game you invented is only playable by people who've transformed. And that's the ultimate protection. That's the unbreakable barrier. Anyone trying to enter your reality without doing the work simply bounces off. They can't fake their way in. They can't manipulate their way in. They can't charm their way in. Transformation is the ticket price, and they refuse to pay it. So here you are, standing in a reality you built from scratch, playing a game you invented from pain, surrounded by people who earned their place through growth, protected by rules that require evolution to understand. And somewhere out there, they're still trying to figure out what happened, still running their old programs, still wondering why nothing works anymore, still hoping the old you will resurface so they can have another chance. But that person is gone. That person was a caterpillar. You're something else entirely now, something with wings, something that operates in dimensions they can't access. Something that left their game so far behind, it's not even visible in the rearview mirror anymore. They taught you how to play, and you invented something better. They gave you the pieces, and you built a different puzzle. They showed you their world, and you created your own universe. That's not just survival. That's transcendence. That's evolution. That's what happens when someone takes everything designed to break them and alchemizes it into something beautiful, something powerful, something entirely new. You learned their game, you mastered every rule, you understood every strategy, and then you did the only thing they never saw coming. You stopped playing, you built something else. And now they're standing outside your kingdom, faces pressed against glass they can't break, watching you thrive in a reality they'll never enter. Congratulations. You didn't just win, you invented victory. You've been sitting there, haven't you? Replaying every moment, every conversation, every argument. Wondering what you did wrong, wondering why they left, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you were too much, too emotional, too intense, too needy, too broken, too complicated, too difficult to love. Let me stop you right there. Let me tell you something that's going to hit different. Something that might sting at first, but will set you free if you let it sink in deep enough. You were never hard to love. Never. Not once. Not for a single second. They were just too weak to stay. Yeah, I said it. Weak. Not busy. Not confused. Not dealing with their own stuff. Weak. Because loving someone real, someone raw, someone who actually gives a damn, that takes strength, that takes courage, that takes a kind of backbone most people don't have. And they didn't have it. Simple as that. You keep blaming yourself like you were the problem, like your love was some kind of burden they had to carry, like your heart was too heavy for their hands. But here's the truth they'll never admit. Their hands were too fragile. Their spine was too soft. Their soul was too shallow to hold something as deep as what you were offering. You loved hard. That's not a crime. You showed up. That's not a flaw. You cared when they stopped caring. You fought when they gave up. You stayed when they had one foot out the door. And somehow you convinced yourself that you were the problem? Nah, that's the lie they left you with. That's the poison they injected into your mind before they walked away. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone matched your energy? When was the last time someone looked at you and said, "I'm not going anywhere no matter how hard this gets"? When was the last time someone fought for you the way you fight for everyone else? Exactly. You can't remember. Because it hasn't happened. Because you've been surrounded by people who take and take and take until there's nothing left. And when you finally need something back, when you finally ask for a crumb of what you've been giving in loaves, they act like you're asking for too much. They act like you're difficult. They act like loving you is some kind of chore. But loving you was never the problem. Loving you was a privilege. A privilege they weren't worthy of. A privilege they squandered because they were too busy looking for easy. And you, my friend, you were never easy. You were real. And real scares people. Real exposes people. Real demands that they show up fully or not at all. And most people, they'd rather not show up at all than be forced to face their own inadequacy. You want to know why they left? It wasn't because you were too much. It was because they were too little. Too little courage, too little depth, too little commitment, too little strength. They couldn't handle the weight of a real connection because they've been skating through life on surface-level nonsense. Situationships, half-loves, almost relationships, maybes and some days. And let's see where this goes. And then you came along, you with your whole heart on display, you with your no games, no lies, no pretending approach, you who actually meant it when you said, "I'm here for you." And it terrified them because they've never had to be accountable. They've never had to match someone's energy. They've never had to look someone in the eyes and know that this person won't accept crumbs. So they ran. Not because you were hard to love, but because you were impossible to fake with. You were impossible to half-love. You demanded presence, and they only knew how to give absence. You demanded honesty, and they only knew how to give excuses. That's not your fault. That's their limitation. You've been walking around with this weight on your chest, thinking something's wrong with you, thinking you need to change, thinking maybe if you were quieter, less emotional, less needy, less you, then maybe they would have stayed. But I need you to hear this clearly. If you have to shrink yourself to be loved, it's not love. If you have to hide parts of yourself to be accepted, it's not acceptance. If you have to pretend to be less than you are so someone else feels comfortable, they don't deserve your comfort. You are not too much. You are enough. More than enough. You are a full-course meal, being rejected by people who only know how to handle snacks. You are a 5-star experience, being overlooked by people who've been eating fast food their whole lives. They don't know what to do with quality because they've never had it. They don't know how to treat something real because they've been playing with toys their whole life. And here's the part that's going to hurt. They might find someone else. They might move on. They might post pictures and look happy and make you question everything all over again. But trust me on this. Trust me like your life depends on it. What they find next won't be you. It won't be close. It won't be anywhere near the depth, the loyalty, the fire you brought. They'll settle for less, because less is all they can handle. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, they'll be lying next to someone and thinking about you, wondering what could have been, wondering why they weren't strong enough to stay. That's their curse, not yours. Your curse was believing you weren't worth fighting for. Your curse was internalizing their weakness as your flaw. Your curse was looking in the mirror and seeing a problem when all you've ever been is a gift they weren't ready to receive, a gift they didn't know how to unwrap, a gift they left on the shelf because they were too afraid of what it might demand from them. But gifts don't stop being valuable just because someone doesn't open them. Diamonds don't stop being precious just because someone throws them away. And you don't stop being worthy of love just because some weak-minded, shallow-hearted, commitment-phobic person couldn't see what was standing right in front of them. Let me tell you what's going to happen next. You're going to heal. Slowly. Painfully. But you're going to heal. And in that healing, you're going to realize something beautiful. You're going to realize that their leaving wasn't a loss. It was a filter. It filtered out someone who was never meant to go the distance with you. It removed someone who would have held you back. It cleared the path for someone who actually deserves a seat at your table. Because the right one, the one who's meant for you, they're not going to run. They're not going to flinch when things get hard. They're not going to look at your depth and call it too much. They're going to look at your depth and dive in. They're going to see your intensity and match it. They're going to feel your fire and add fuel to it instead of trying to put it out. The right one won't be intimidated by your love. They'll be grateful for it. They won't see your emotions as a burden. They'll see them as proof that you're alive, that you're real, that you're human in the most beautiful way. They won't ask you to be less. They'll thank God you're not like everyone else. But right now you need to stop mourning people who were never strong enough to stay. You need to stop crying over cowards. You need to stop losing sleep over people who never deserved your dreams. They made their choice. They chose easy over real. They chose comfort over growth. They chose their own weakness over your love. And that says everything about them and nothing about you. You want closure? Here it is. You were never the problem. You were the answer to a question they were too scared to ask. You were the solution to a loneliness they weren't ready to face. You were the mirror that showed them who they really were, and they couldn't handle the reflection, so they walked away. Not because you failed, but because they couldn't rise. And now you get to decide what happens next. You can stay stuck in the past, replaying their words, analyzing every moment, wondering where it went wrong. Or you can stand up, dust yourself off, and recognize your own power. Recognize that you've been assigning value to people who never earned it. Recognize that you've been begging for attention from people who don't deserve your presence. Recognize that the love you've been pouring out into empty vessels could be poured back into yourself. Start there. Start with you. Start loving yourself the way you loved them. Start showing up for yourself the way you showed up for them. Start fighting for yourself the way you fought for them. Because if you can love someone that hard, someone who didn't even stay, Imagine what you can do when you turn that love inward. Imagine who you become when you stop chasing and start building. Imagine the life you create when you stop waiting for someone to validate your existence and start validating yourself. You were never hard to love. Say it out loud, right now. I was never hard to love. They were just too weak to stay. Feel that? That's freedom. That's the chains breaking. That's the lie dissolving. That's you taking back the narrative they tried to write for you. They wanted you to believe you were the villain in the story. They wanted you to carry the blame so they could walk away guilt-free. But you're not the villain. You never were. You were the hero who kept showing up in a story where everyone else kept walking out. And heroes don't break. Heroes bend. Heroes bleed. Heroes fall. But heroes always, always get back up. So get up. Get up and stop apologizing for who you are. Get up and stop dimming your light so others feel comfortable in their darkness. Get up and realize that every single person who left made room for something better, made room for someone stronger, made room for a version of you that doesn't need external validation to know their worth. You are worthy. You are valuable. You are lovable. Not in spite of your intensity, because of it. Not in spite of your emotions, because of them. Not in spite of who you are, because of exactly who you are. The world is full of watered down, half-hearted, lukewarm people. People who play it safe. People who never commit. People who keep one foot out the door just in case. But you're fire. Your depth. Your loyalty that doesn't waver. And that's rare. That's precious. That's something most people will go their whole lives without ever experiencing. So don't you dare let someone's inability to handle you make you think you need to be handled differently. Don't you dare let their weakness rewrite your story. Don't you dare shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were always too small for you. You were made for more. You were built for depth. You were designed for a love that most people only read about in books or see in movies. And it's coming. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it's coming. The kind of love that doesn't run. The kind of love that sees your fire and says, finally. The kind of love that looks at everything you are and says, I'm strong enough to stay. Until then, stay strong, stay whole. Stay you, unapologetically, unashamedly, completely you, because you were never hard to love. They were just too weak to stay. And that weakness, that's on them. Forever. You know what the real tragedy is? It's not that they left. People leave all the time. That's life. The real tragedy is what they took with them. They took your confidence, they took your trust, they took that beautiful, innocent part of you that used to believe in love without conditions. They took the version of you that gave freely without keeping score, and they left you with doubt, with questions, with this constant loop in your head asking what's wrong with me. Nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. Everything was wrong with them. But you can't see that yet, because you're still wearing the glasses they gave you. You're still looking at yourself through their lens. A lens that was cracked from the start. A lens that was designed to distort your image so they could feel better about their own reflection. They needed you to feel small so they could feel big. They needed you to feel flawed so they could ignore their own cracks. They needed you to carry the weight of the failure so they could walk away with clean hands. But their hands aren't clean, they never will be. Because somewhere deep inside in that place they don't let anyone see, they know. They know they ran from something real. They know they chose fear over love. They know they'll spend the rest of their lives wondering what would have happened if they had just been brave enough to stay. That's their burden now, not yours. Your burden was carrying them. Your burden was hoping they'd change. Your burden was believing that if you just loved a little harder, gave a little more, sacrificed a little deeper, maybe they'd finally see your value. But you can't make someone see what they've chosen to ignore. You can't force someone to value what they've decided to discard. You can't love someone into loving you back. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Love isn't supposed to be a battle. It's not supposed to be a constant fight to be seen, to be heard, to be chosen. Love, real love, is supposed to be two people showing up every single day saying, I'm here. Not because it's easy, but because you're worth it. And anyone who makes you feel like you have to earn that basic level of commitment isn't giving you love. They're giving you a test. A test you were never supposed to pass because the game was rigged from the start. Stop playing their games. Stop performing for people who were never going to give you a standing ovation, no matter how perfectly you danced. Stop auditioning for a role in someone's life when they've already cast someone else. Stop trying to convince people to choose you when the right person won't need convincing. The right person will look at you and know, without hesitation, without doubt, without conditions. They'll know that what you have is rare, that your heart is precious, that your loyalty is unmatched, and they'll spend every day making sure you never question your worth again. That person exists. Maybe you haven't met them yet. Maybe you've met them and the timing wasn't right. Maybe they're out there right now, healing from their own heartbreak, becoming the person they need to be so they can love you the way you deserve. But they exist, and they're coming. And when they arrive, everything you went through will make sense. Every tear will make sense. Every sleepless night will make sense. Every person who left will make sense. Because they were all just preparing you, strengthening you, teaching you what love isn't, so you could recognize what love is when it finally stands in front of you. But until that day comes, you have work to do, not on becoming more lovable. You're already that. The work is on believing it. The work is on removing the lies they planted in your mind. The work is on unlearning everything they taught you about yourself. The work is on standing in front of that mirror every single day and saying, I am enough, exactly as I am, because you are. You always were. You always will be. They were just too weak to stay. And honestly, thank God for that. Thank God they left. Thank God they showed you who they really were before you wasted any more time. Thank God they removed themselves because you might have held on forever. You might have kept fighting for something that was already dead. You might have spent your whole life trying to water a plant that was never going to grow. But now you're free. Free from the weight of their expectations, free from the performance of being less than you are. Free from the exhaustion of loving someone who couldn't love you back. Use that freedom wisely. Use it to build. Use it to grow. Use it to become the person you were always meant to be before they made you question everything. Use it to create a life so full, so rich, so beautiful, that their absence becomes irrelevant. Not because you forgot them, but because you outgrew the need for their validation. That's the goal. Not revenge. Not proving them wrong. Just growth. Just peace. Just becoming so complete within yourself that anyone who enters your life is a bonus, not a necessity. You were never hard to love. Remember that. Tattoo it on your soul. Write it on your mirror. Repeat it until you believe it. They were just too weak to stay. And weak people don't deserve strong love. You deserve someone just as strong as you are. And they're coming. Just wait.